Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome back to BlackTalk, a film screening and criticism salon series where Black movies matter. I'm Tre'vell Anderson, and in the great tradition of the Harlem Renaissance, I've brought together a group of cultural workers and beautiful thinkers to watch a movie and talk about it. We're putting the power and purpose of film criticism back where it belongs, in the hands of the beloved community. For our final film in the series, we're actually doing something different. We're watching two movies, okay? Nyala Moon's short, How Not to Date While Trans, and D. Smith's Kokomo City. It's gonna be good. Be sure to follow us at Slayzhon for more, and we hope you enjoy. All right, so I want to first start with kind of your thoughts around the short by Nyala, which is meant to be this kind of comedic, irreverent, Black trans woman's perspective on dating. What stuck out to y'all most immediately about that? Who wants to go first? Don't be nervous.
I'll go first.
There we go,
It
Tameka.
felt deeply nostalgic for me. Like, as a teenager, early aughts, the type of the actual like cinematography, the pan cameras, the tight shots, the making something really, really dark a really, really like funny punchline. And those things, we just sat in front of many screens and had that kind of like served to us. And it also, she gave me big like it girl energy.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And that's another thing that reminded me of the early aughts films, those it girl types that kind of are just magnetic in that way. And things are able to land because they're so close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. There were like moments that I was just like trying to think more about the dialogue to engage with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was on the journey with her. So at times it would have to come to me in reflection versus being able to catch it as it was happening.
Yeah.
Which I think makes the point land
Absolutely.
louder. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it was good.
I love that you use the word nostalgic, because I do think the really beautiful thing about Nyla's work is there's that piece, but it's also modernized. She's bringing it to a very like, I felt like I knew this girl, or I wanted to know this girl, or hang out with this girl, because it felt refreshing, it felt young, it didn't feel like tethered to an idea of what a Black trans woman or girl had to be. It was kind of like very individualized, but still very relatable. And I think that's so important because when you look at the two stories that we watched tonight, they're completely two different perspectives of trans like storytelling is at the intersection of Blackness. And I couldn't long and want for that even more, because the diversity within our own like community and storytelling is so necessary and needed. And I think you can find yourself in both stories at different times, but still see the through line and the DNA of what an experience really kind of looks like. And I think that's like really important.
For me, seeing the first one was very kind of in the vein of, I've been told, or I hear / see a lot of Black queer people being told that they're funny, and a lot of their funny being rooted in their like trauma, right? And so that's what I kind of got from that, was like, if she didn't laugh at what she had gone through in her lived experience, she wouldn't be able to survive, right? And so it's like, it was almost therapeutic for her to kind of be like, let me make this, let me talk about this really fucked up thing. Can we cuss? Okay, I just want to make sure. So that was the thing that I had instantly got. Like, even just the moments, like the moment of the gentleman, instead of using the stairs, he ran away up the bushes. Like he like it for me, it was kind of like
That's what she get for dating a white man.
right. Well, but also like it's this
That's
feeling.
what you get for dating men. Let's be honest. I'm gonna get into that later.
Right, but I think for me, it's
That white man,
he
he's a hype.
Like a light walk off screen. No, he
He
ran.
take the hardest path forward to get away from this.
For real.
right. But I say all of that to say I think it really does show kind of like in a brighter sense, right? This idea that sometimes you have to really be able to kind of read between the lines, or you have to find that silver lining in order for you to be able to survive. Because if you can't find joy even in the bad parts of your lived experience, then you ain't gonna make it. You know?
What year was that made?
2022.
Oh, okay. It did feel very nostalgic, and it also reminds me of like the heyday of Black movies and shorts being on YouTube. And that being the reality is, even with the boom of Black media being made on television, the reality is a lot of queer stories are still on YouTube. That is where we're learning about ourselves besides porn, right? Like that's where we're seeing our interactions of dating and the storytelling around that. So stylistically, I do like, again, whenever new or emergent Black filmmakers go to tell stories, they're referencing Spike Lee. Like they're referencing some of our favorite, like it felt very Sex and the City. It felt very Girlfriends to tell these new kinds of stories, which just continues to highlight for me there will never be enough stories about Black, queer, and trans dating. There's not enough. So I always appreciate it in that context. And it's not about like the take on representation, but the take on like there is a gap. There is a void in content being made, which is also why they're referencing works that did not include us at all. Because we don't have other works to reference from our gaze as Black, queer, and trans folks. So that was the theme that comes up for me also with Kokomo City. I know we're talking about the first one, but just how things are filmed, how you're getting to enter into these spaces is important. Now, the joke telling, again, it's like we're all consuming these pieces of culture that, of course, are influencing the things that we're making now. And then for me, it's always important to get into the narrative that we're being told. And I think too often, but I get why it's an entry point, that a lot of the work that I'm seeing around trans Black women and dating is hyper fixated on men. And I wonder why that is. I wonder why even the conversations about passability, like it's always an interesting take for me as someone who was born a woman and identifies as a woman, whatever that, like even those things, the way we're trying to access our identity is kind of fragile, because I'm also experiencing life as a dark-skinned 5'11" plus size Black girl, which already throws me out of, I've said this before, the ownership that I have on femininity and womanhood is simply because I say so, not because the world is actually giving that to me. I have to claim it, just like I think most Black women have to claim it. Is like, because everything is actually, it's not even just about your owner, like claiming womanhood. Everything is trying to knock you out of your humanity. And I think stories like that get us back to like, these are humans and we do need to see that. And now like, I wonder when the conversation is going to, especially as I identify as a lesbian, like there are places that there are things that I've had to learn how to do in order to find women to date, as someone who also presents as femme, and it's going into queer spaces that are made for us. So I'm always wondering, like, what are those stories as well? That's, I want to know more about that. Like, where are people going to date and have these experiences? And are trans women having more conversations about queerness and queer attraction or trans attraction? Because those two stories are definitely about navigating cis alleged cis and heteronormative relationships, which I think is the problem.
There is a new short film by a up-and-coming filmmaker. Her name is Alexander King, and she actually has a short that's called And Then There Was Her, and it discusses like lesbian and trans women relationships and how that kind of navigates, and the kind of intercommunal conversations that happen between cis women and trans women and how they kind of can meet in this romantic space. And it kind of opened my eyes. They're one of the glad any cohort members of like the most recent kind of fellowship, and I had no clue that was like a conversation that was even having, like, but it's really nuanced and interesting. But that story was so refreshing to see, because I was like, wow, I never have seen that particular moment in like storytelling,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Beandrea?
Yeah, I thought it was really, I mean, some excellent points are being made, and I'm sort of a little bit piggybacking off of, I'm thinking about the fourth wall in the short, and I think it's important, like, that thread throughout, because it's a way of, like, taking back power from the situation and being able to, like, have some agency in navigating, you know, where so much of it is out, like you can't control who's attracted to you, right? So, and you certainly can't control who is attracted to you and proud of it, you know? So I thought that was interesting. And I also thought to the white hiker who left, you know, she says, "You're so progressive," right? And I just think it's important because she doesn't, you know, it's really easy to write off the, you know, obviously transphobic folks that she didn't make it to the third date with. But what's so much the difference between him and them, you know, in terms of the end result, you know? And then, of course, it's the guy that she hooks up with, that she's just looking to hook up with, that actually seems to offer something more, you know? And sometimes I feel like this is where I'm at in my dating life, is just like, you know, whatever, let's be in the moment, you know? I don't have an agenda, you know, I'm not talking about a future plan. I'm just like, let's just be here in this moment and see what happens, you know? And so I really appreciated that. It felt very true to life.
If I may, I think to your point, there was something that really struck me in that moment, because it was like, I think sometimes, and even for myself as a non-binary person, it's like when good finds you, you don't recognize it as good, and you don't feel like you're deserving of it. And that's what I was wondering, if that's what she was trying to say, was that she was doing all of this work to try to find a quote-unquote good man. And then the one that she thought was progressive enough for her ends up not being the person. He just wasn't that you know, he wasn't that girl for her. And then the one that she clearly wasn't given any time of day to was the one that was really trying to invest and really try. So I don't know, for me it was just a very interesting take towards to end on, of this idea of like her having to try to figure out herself, and then also kind of being so cheeky and funny about it, but then not being able to really recognize the good that was actually in her lap at that moment.
And I did, to your point about the comedy and trauma intersection, like, you know, that, you know, she sort of laughed off, like, I was also malnourished as a kid, but you allowed me to transition early. Like, okay. You know, like, I mean,
Say more about that.
Say more about that. Haha, funny. You know, so I did walk this line of like, who's in on the is she making fun of herself for so that other people don't get to it first, or is, you know, there was legit comedy in it for sure.
Oh no, definitely.
But I did wonder about that at times.
This is a good moment to bring Kokomo City into the conversation. The reason why I kind of put both of them together is because there is this element of comedy throughout both of them, right? That it's used as a tool for these Black trans women, right, to share their experiences with us. And I do think, you know, the whole, you know, we gotta laugh to keep from crying thing is part of it, but I think there's also something to how we, right, as the audience are able to perhaps receive things, right, through a comedic lens, and how that may be at play. AJ, you ain't said nothing yet?
I mean, sometimes when this is like my second time, I think, and I'm still thinking about the first time and how some of that felt like there were things in which I saw that weren't necessarily my lived experience that I could catch, but it wasn't something that I could speak to with like an I statement, because I'm still thinking of this through a viewer. Like I'm watching it and I'm like, you're about to walk into that wall, but I can't tell you you're about to walk into the wall, but I can see it, but we can't talk about it until you walk into that wall, because I saw it before you saw it. And that makes me think about my own self and my own experience as like a Black male, and sitting in some of these spaces, and just like how oftentimes pave is there for me to like walk very smoothly, and I can walk in and like I got it, and they're like, you're just falling right in line with like that one. The second movie, I thought there was just that conversation around like I had to get up when she's like, okay, my mother was abandoned by yet another black man for me choosing to be who I am. That to me felt, it still was another moment in which their masculinity was presented as like, you're speaking for your mom. You don't know that, and are you having that conversation with your mom? You know what I mean? And I think that oftentimes like when these films, the intersection of like where black masculinity and black femininity meet is still very violent and aggressive to me, and it's hard for me to show up as like a nuanced black male, because I think that oftentimes I'm like, the easy thing for me to do is be ignorant here. I can walk in and just it all be on the plate for me. That's harder for me to try to figure out what these constructs are, because there's nowhere to go with that, truly. And I think when I think about the first one, like when I was like, okay, for me, when you're talking about laughing till you kept from crying, I was like, the fact that the trans woman was like depicted under the table as like dead, I was like, that is not funny. And like we roll past it so fast that it's like, I'm also being trained how to take in like black trauma, like at milliseconds. Like I'm laughing and the next thing happened, the next thing happened, the next thing happened, the next thing happened, so I have to be like, wait, did I see somebody dead under a table? So it's
like
hard
what
for
you
me.
said, Tameka, of realizing things in reflection.
Yeah, because
right?
it was coming by so quickly, but also because I was living alongside this character.
Yeah.
So it's like I probably took as much time to process this as the character might have taken to process the levity of the type of experience that is. Yeah, that's a very interesting.
And when you couple that with like passing and passability and what all that can mean in any space, I think that's when it gets really complex, because it's like to call it out is violent. Like it disrupts the system. That's what that one person was saying. Like, I don't like when people call out these men and their sexuality, because it fucks the game up. And we're all in the game, and it's not just you getting revenge on this one guy, it's gonna fuck up the whole well. And I was just like, this is so deep, because it's like, to see we're walking into a wall and to not be able to say, this is a wall. We have to do it as a community. Like, because when I saw them looking in the mirror and they kept sort of critiquing themselves, it's like, how real am I? How not am I? How this am I? And I'm like, this is a really small thing that we're all trying to fit into at any given time. And if you don't fit into that, if you step away from that, it's death. And so that's why I think it's sad that we're still thinking about ourselves as either laughable, conceivable, packageable, or dead. There is nothing in between.
What you got over here?
Oh, does anyone?
I heard a huh. I don't know if it was a good one or
Why? Does anyone else want to speak?
no.
I'm just giving the space. Yeah, do you want us?
I mean, that's hard to. I think a lot of like, just from a storytelling perspective, I think humor is like the quickest way sometimes to get an audience to empathize with you, and I do feel like sometimes it's like the duality of wanting to get empathy and attention, you know, getting people to see your story and see your humanity, while also kind of like downplaying the trauma of it. It's kind of hard. It's a tricky line to navigate, because it's like we are talking about it and you want people to see the story, but then it's like also how you're packaging your own trauma is very, I don't know, it's rough. But yeah, the two biggest themes I was thinking about were like the idea of passing, and how like kind of like all black people have to deal with that in some ways, but then also the fear of vulnerability, and especially the first one, and like I feel like the reality of the potential match is terrifying. And you could kind of see the fear in Kokomo City as well, of like what's life gonna look like outside of my world, and it's so hard to even like imagine it, and let alone like actually leave all of it behind. I don't know, there's so many themes going that I'm like racing through my mind right now.
Can I say too, that was kind of weird too, one of the like the ambitious parts, when they were like, I saw a trans woman on like TV as like I don't know, like a Real Housewives of Atlanta or something like that. I don't know what it was. Right. But it was something that was like essentially like a laughable role, but they were like, I aspire to be. And it made me think about back in the day, like I've seen some of these women in other films before, which I think is a huge part of why I'm also triggered by this, because it's like, in Paris Burning, I remember how she was appointing all the girls on the wall. And she's like, I just want to be like her because this reason. She's so demure. Whatever we were talking about. And it's like they're just all buying these cartoon versions of reality. And I've seen these women in other roles before, and they were very aggressive in other spaces. And like, I'm like, one of them I think was like talking about her partner as like clockable or something like that. Like she was most attracted to him because he wasn't perceived as a gay black man.
Right.
So it's also one of these things where it's like we're arguing about a certain thing, but you're actively attracted to a system in which will.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's the movie, though, right? I think Kokomo City in particular is attempting to show the complexity and the murkiness of life, right, through the lens of these different black trans women, right? Because I think one, we have to give space, right, for the folks who are in the public eye whose feelings, positions might change, right?
Yes.
From whatever they said in the first compared to what they might be articulating now. But then I also think, right, that one of the things I like about Kokomo City is you get 4 different perspectives of the women, of the women who are like, I want to subscribe to this, leave me alone, don't fuck up the game for all of us. And you also have the women who are saying, I used to buy into that, I no longer buy into that, and that it's all kind of a shifting thing. And I think it's always interesting, right, where we find or don't find ourselves, right, in the narrative. Because the point you brought up that Daniela makes about, what she feels like her mother might have gone through experiencing her son abandon her like another black man did, is something that my mother, said to me. You know what I mean? Explicitly and not explicitly, grandparents, etc., right? And so I do think that there is both this kind of capitulation to the systems of oppression, right? That allow all of us to survive, and there's also this like critique happening or attempt to critique, because that's what we all trying to do, right? We all are like both calling out the capitalism and also trying to make our money, right? We are. I am. I speak for myself.
Period.
Right?
Period.
Like,
I'm waiting on the point.
I just think it's.
I can't wait for our honorary.
Right. I'm gonna need that.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to ask y'all though is about the black and white of it all. About the black and white of it all.
The black and white. I'm so glad you said that.
Here it go. Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, because just before we move past it,
You're good.
because I think I really appreciate the different perspectives that we brought to the How Not to Date as Trans and Kokomo City. And I think when you think about Nyla's short film, it's in the title. She's giving us examples of what we shouldn't do. And she also gives us examples of
That was good to me.
not only just like, it's not really my responsibility to make you feel good or bad about whatever situation that I'm in. And I think her storytelling for me, and the reason why I think I like it a lot, is because it's like one of those moments where it's like, if you know, you know, and there's still something new that you're learning. And I think some of the girls, some of the dolls don't have to be activists, and we shouldn't make them want to be activists. That shouldn't be their job if they don't want it to be, because Hunter Schafer doesn't have to be, so why does the black trans girl have to be? And I sit at this interesting like intersection of like thinking about what it means to create like black content, and that the responsibility that it holds for sure, and you have to be mindful with any platform. But I also sometimes want to be like shaken free from the rules that we somehow kind of put on ourselves and are forced to kind of like talk about or do.
The burdens of representation.
The burdens of it all. And I think Nyla, for me, yes, those moments are uncomfortable. Yes, those moments you might not agree with. Even Kokomo City, like, you might not think it's okay for them to, like, be looking at their idea of what it means to make it. But that's kind of that's real life. That's like who we are in our complex, nuanced ways. And I think that's kind of like the point of these two films, in my
Go to
opinion.
Tameka and then come to you.
I have so many thoughts, and I'm trying to like rein them all in because you all are making such brilliant points that then expand my thought. You see the conundrum that it creates for me specifically, but was okay. I'm trying to synthesize it down to not veer us off into another course. I keep coming back to the word imagination. I keep coming back to it. It's like echoing in my mind, and what happens when these stories are told and how it is the hack to imagination. And I don't think people realize the hack that it is and what it could allow us to experience as like a human race if we were to continue to head in these journeys and do these discussions and like talk about it all. Because I really think that is the work of like our human experience. But yeah, to come back, I was saying that on imagination because it keeps coming back to me. But I was thinking about the black and white of it all after Tre'vell had said something about the comedy in both, and how important all of the cinematography is. And I keep coming back around to that too, because putting it in black and white, I don't know what that does
I was
for
thinking the same thing when it was happening.
for the way that it's being delivered. I don't know what it's like exiling us from that we then can like again hack into another area of our minds and our psyches and how we understand what is happening. But it does something every time, because I swear that would be a completely different film had it been colored different.
And the sound design would be different. No shade.
I don't want to step on what Amber's going to say. I just want to say that just to hold that thought with you, it was so interesting to me too, because there was times when I took what the advice was much more serious because it was in black and white. And it made me almost think about like when you think about those like nuanced, like noir pictures of our grandparents, certain things. At that time they were young and they were making active mistakes, but it's something that's like a forewarning. And I felt like when I was listening to those guys talk about like, if you like it, just fucking like it, but like
In the
da-da-da.
shadows.
But it's taking advice that's like, it's not applicable because you're not about to walk into a room and be like, this is what I'm on and y'all gonna deal with it, or I'm gonna fight everybody in this room. You're probably 1 against 99 at that point. So, but there was some times when I felt like even when she was talking about, I hope I'm not going too long, but when she's talking about the men that she's attracted to, I kept feeling like it made more sense to me when it was in black and white, and I could see the guy standing on the corner, rolling down the window. Certain things felt so familiar, but coupled with that, I was like, oh, this is like a forewarning that anybody should heed to. Versus when it got very fantasy driven with like their what ifs and who they could pull and what kind of type of whatever, I was like, you're just talking.
Yeah, I think the black and white does something too in terms of, for me, acknowledging what's missing from film, the canon of film, the history of film, which are stories like this. So it's modern, but it's also throwing us back to what hasn't been there. So it's doing that work a little bit. It's doing that work. And I also think that the black and white and the comedy is, in both of the works, they are, we're talking about life and basically the limits of white supremacist capitalistic patriarchy, right? And in real time, even in the production of black work, you're dealing with that, which is why you're getting jump cuts and quick jokes and even limited time and budget around the film. Like when I made my first short film, that was even it being a short film, it's 30 minutes, was a stretch because no one who I was talking to at the time could imagine me beyond 1 to 5 minutes because I was known through my social media content. And I'm like, if y'all can sit and watch 30 Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
If you can watch 30 Marvels,
And they still
hundreds of hours of this, you can sit with me for 30 minutes. You can sit with me for 30 minutes. You can sit with me for longer than an Instagram reel and hear about my life.
Right.
And then inquire about how I can tell more stories.
Yes.
So there's that. Then I think both of the pieces do this work of acknowledging what I think is so radical and like expansive and imaginary with Black women is the reality that Black girls can really be anything. And that's what's making y'all so uncomfortable around us.
limitless.
Yes.
We're very much limitless. All of it's giving Black girl. It's just a different kind of Black girl, which has always been the case. And that makes everyone uncomfortable for some reason.
Ooh, it's hot.
So that's an acknowledgement for me. And then
Come on.
there's
notes.
this, get this.
I just I see it.
Listen, I even got my little, my girl.
Teacher's pet.
I'm here to please.
Trying to get an A.
Black girls can be anything.
Black women.
Okay, yeah. But then there's also
Black women okay.
there's also the comment about the accessibility of Black women and what they should and shouldn't be doing, and what the responsibility to each other is. Even within this white supremacist capitalistic patriarchy. And I think what we're also, we talk about that because it's closer to us and we have thoughts on it and wishes and hopes around it. But also I think I don't want to ever move us past the fact that we're missing out on doing a deep dive on how dangerous patriarchy is for us, how life-threatening it is, and not just, I'm saying patriarchy to be generous, but like how Black men specifically are operating within it. Because the thing that's true about the movie, even we're talking about the joke of the trauma of her being under the bed dead, in Kokomo City, one of the girls does not even make it to see the film.
No way.
Yeah,
She passes. She is murdered by a very young Black man. And I think that makes Black people so uncomfortable to talk about the fact that even when white people are not present, regardless if you think success is being a white woman or being on reality TV show or Benihana's, that it is people in our communities who are killing us. Not just harming us, not cheating on us, who are literally murdering us. We start off with the joke of going toe to toe with the gun, and the reason why it's funny is because she lives. So it's like, until we're really willing to pull that up and not be afraid of like, yo, Black men are killing us for nothing. For nothing. And not only is that happening, but they're killing people who are providing things to them.
If I may, not to cut you off, but I saw a tweet last week, what you're speaking to, and I hope I get it right, but she said, y'all treat trans women in public how you treat cis women in private.
Right. And in public.
And in public too. But I think for me, like you're speaking to that, I think there's a lot, so to your point, I'm processing the idea of when you talk about the quick clips, I've always said Black people, we don't get to process our trauma ever. It's always like, oh girl, that happens, you move on. Like it happened. And your parents tell you this too, right? Like don't stay in it for too long. But it's like something terrible happened to me, right? And so I've been processing that, but I've been really processing, like as I watch Kokomo this third time, this idea of how they're saying, I want a life outside of this because that's the only life they know.
Right.
And it's like, that's the only thing that they've been given. And it's almost like how even just the men sitting in the car, like there's nothing, like they're like, oh yeah, well I don't want to be caught with a trans woman or it's scary, but it's like, but trans women are dying, like there's nothing scary to you about it, right? And so and
you know who's killing them.
Yeah, you do.
That's
you do.
It'd be your
homeboy.
It'd be your homeboy, and I think sometimes we think it's so far, and it's similar to in the first part where we're talking about the failure of the questions around what is progressive,
right?
Because people can say anything,
right?
But this is why, like, I always go to Black feminist theory. Is like the core of that work is 1-to-1. Black feminism isn't just like what you think up here in the world, or it's not supposed to be.
Right.
It's about how you're learning this to treat each other better. What are you willing to do to be in better community with each other? What conversations are you willing to have to be? What contradictions are you willing to make in order for us to be alive? And I think hard conversations. And this is the final thing, and then I'll throw it, is like what makes it so heartbreaking is even when they were talking about not fucking up the money, like, but the reality is exposing these behaviors will keep us alive. It's literally it's your key to freedom is to have these conversations and to talk about how we're treating each other. Like, when conflict arises in small communities, especially queer communities, one of the things I've noticed when Black women are being harmed, we take it like so personal. We think it is our failure. Like, you messed up, you didn't read the sign, you didn't see this red flag. But under all of our connection to each other is simply a desire to be loved, right? Which is something everybody has. So if we're operating with that kind of open heart, the thing that we need to do to protect each other is tell the truth on each other and to share it and not be worried about, well, it might cut off this person from an opportunity, but this person is robbing you. This person is harming you. And it's not doing anybody any favors to not talk about that shit.
It's like, for what? For a Chanel bag? Like, for what?
Maybe.
Yeah, like, for what?
Benny Hanna, and I'm like, not for nothing, because some people like Benny Hanna's, but like, no. There are more beautiful things than Benny Hanna's, baby.
There's some parts about the film that I still, every time we do this, it gets very uncomfortable, and I don't think it needs to be about me or something being comfortable and not spoken about, but it's just so, like I told you, like I felt like when they hit that tribal drum music, I was like, what's left to do? Because it's gotten down to where it's like, bitch, what are the basics? You are dark, you are black skin, you are this, you are that. And so if that's not the read, they talk about that. If we're this the same, then I can't critique you on that because we're both the same. So then I could go to this because I'm better than you in that versus this versus that. And it just goes all the way down to skin and the market around that. And that's what was uncomfortable for me, thinking about, I am speaking from a distance perspective, but the idea of someone saying like, your husband sees me as a woman because they'll fuck you and then climb in my hole, that's not the same to you. And I was just like, that's not this. There's 99 other reasons.
Lacking humanity
There's
right
99 other reasons as to why this person is a woman besides their objectivity.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, so the first version, I mean, I would just say, just to bring some color, at the I attended the premiere of it. I came to the tail end of it at Sundance, and it was electric in that room. Like, they got a standing ovation, like all of them. At that time, I believe Coco was still alive. And so all of them were there, and they just got so much love from that room, and that felt really important to see that they get that welcome, and I also think that the second version, because I've been told that now the version that was released to the wide audience is different from what we saw, and I wondered if people, to the white capitalist patriarchy of it all, like had, execs had made notes about, we got to make this more palatable, because it did felt like it cheapened it with some of the sound design and the tighter cuts. It felt like the first version had much more of a looser feel. It felt like this version, as powerful as it is, it just felt so chock full, and like it almost didn't have a focus.
There
You
was
know?
times when I felt like it could have been over like 4 times.
Yeah.
There were times when I was like,
And
this
all
is
the reenactments,
going
I didn't
on.
think, like when you said, what else is there to do? It's like, I don't know if it needed all that.
I
Like,
definitely don't think it needed. Sorry, just to add to you,
Yeah.
I don't think it needed that tribal drunk. I felt like that. I thought there were parts where this idea of like I'm not interested in passability was enough to chew on for me. Like I was like, that's a beautiful perspective.
I mean, Daniela
Yeah.
alone could have been her own.
Literally
film.
couldn't have been. Yeah, could have
I'm
been.
still digesting these arguments.
Yeah.
So wait, what? Run that back.
To Amber's point though,
I also want to say in terms of the cinema and like how it was filmed, like how everything was from below the girls.
Yes.
Like it was almost
Yes.
like Dee Smith was sitting on the ground talking to these to her sisters. Like the fact that there was so many displays of different kinds of bonnets, like the bathtub scenes. These are images you can only get when people love and trust you with their story.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of my favorite parts about the film is literally where the camera is positioned.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
And there's also something to be said also about the way the body is treated in this even
Right.
even the scenes in the strip club, right? With
Right.
Coco. One of the scenes that I've been wanting to talk with people about is the final scene. With Dominique's, pre-op trans body on display, as Stacey Barth is singing,
Yeah.
Ain't I a Woman Too? Shout out to Sojourner. How did that hit for you all? What did it bring up for y'all? John Paul?
I even because I know that they closed on both versions of it on that scene. And I know for me, what it really brought up is this idea of just watching the movie from the beginning to the end, and even thinking about the short, the process that it takes as a person living at any intersection to love who they are, right? And to be able to look, because I know for myself as somebody who is fat, for a long time, I didn't like looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't want to see myself in the mirror. And then there was a moment where I had to stop and I said, this is my body. I got titties. I got a big belly. It's okay. And so I think for me, it's like, yeah, right? But I'm just saying, like, for me, that's
They
what
like it.
they do like it now. They do. But I'm just saying, this idea of like there is, even with all the trauma and even with all the stuff that we have to learn kind of quote unquote to laugh at, we still have to go through this process of figuring out how do we love what we have. And that's what I got from that. I take from that movie that, yes, a lot of those women in the film are saying, I want more and I want this and I want that. But a lot of it is also saying, I got to work with what I got and I'm going to do what I got to do to get what I need. And so I think that's the thing that really I sit with in both of these things, right? We really, I hear the nuanced points about what we're talking about, but there's also just a part of me that are saying like, these women recognize what they've been handed, and kind of like all Black people, right? We think about our mamas, right? I think about my mom a lot. There were times where I know we didn't have any money and we didn't have any food, and yet we still ate every day, right? I don't know how my mama did it, but she did. And so for me, that scene is very magical in that sense, because it's like I was given this body that I was not happy with, but I've been able to make a life with this body, and I'm learning to love it.
I think it's also helpful as a tool, hopefully, that bridges Black trans women and Black cis women who date men, which is that nobody is tricking your man. Like the conversation about how a lot of the men are looking for a pretty girl with a big dick, like shout out to T.S. Madison and all the work that she has done around that. It's like, honey,
They know.
they know. In fact, not only it's not just about them knowing, it's what they desire. They're seeking it out. You know what I mean? Like it's a preference that is happening that is also again in conflict with the perception of what we think masculinity is, desirability is, and I think in the way that the Kokomo City is a film that is deeply rooted in Blackness. It's a Black movie, as Dee Smith has talked about in some of her interviews. It's like you're also coming up against a lot of narratives around Black excellence and classism. And I think a lot of us still believe that men have something that will allow us to access a better life. And I think, again, for me, that's where both of the movies fall short. As someone who's looking at it through a gaze of a lesbian, it's like we have such a limited imagination on how to build lives outside of men. They are not the end all be all, and no matter how many pieces of representation we get, like, I know people feel certain ways about Kamala Harris running for president, but like literally men are not the only answer to leadership. Men are not the only answer to strong black families. Men are not the only answer to wealth.
Right.
Yeah.
And data is also showing that. Like when you invest in black women, they flip it 2-3 times. So then, and then also these black women are even in queer spaces, they're the ones who are creating enough space for us to have better conversations around non-binary folks and butch and mass and all these other things. It's like the limited imagination is not just capped by capitalism, it's capped by heteronormativity, which is why I really want to see narratives beyond this, because it's so obvious that we need it. We need to know that we can build communities centered around us, not just in navigating or ducking and dodging or trying to survive patriarchy.
Can I add to that, Amber? I think too it's so important on the other end as well, because I feel like a lot of young black men, there's only these binaries of big dick thug or nerd that no one wants. So these are the lanes in which a lot of
intersection.
No, but I'm saying there's things that exist. Well, no, because I just wanted to say, like, when you were saying not only do they know what they're getting, they want it, and I'm like, so on the flip side is like, once we explore, because I felt like a lot of the women were saying like, I can get the type of guys that regular girls want too. So you're comparing your plate to this plate, and I also think on the flip side, these men or whatever, when we get the ideal is that one day they can explore that they actually probably want each other too. And what does that media and that film and all that shit look like too on an open level? Because I do think it was hard for me to I just kept saying to digest. Oftentimes I watch these films and I'm like, I wish the men were just not even present. It takes 99% of the storyline to help some guy barely say this one thing, and all these women type are basically interacting around that, you know?
Why do we need this scene of him fishing?
No, why 3 times though?
Gonna be taught that he was gay. Like he was like, she is Beyonce bad. I can get what Jay-Z had. Like everybody's doing the comparative of what you're calling out black excellence, but I'm just like, it was exhausting for me because I'm like, I can only think about my mom in these rooms too, because I'm like, that is not the only ideal I have of black womanhood.
Right.
And it's hard to see so many people with this idea continue to.
But that's what we're fed. That's what we're fed. I think we're fed to believe that the black man is going to, in some way, shape, or form,
So he could just rise up.
Yeah, if we could just, if we could defend him, or if we can make him stronger. And I think that's the thing that this film is really getting at. This thing that you're taught, and I've even had to like relearn/unlearn this in myself, right? The idea of what black masculinity really is, and a lot of it is violence. The reality of the matter is that we are not taught. Like I've been not necessarily dealing, but I've been really sewing at this idea of like learning to love my softness. I've always been a very soft person. I've always been very, very in tune, which is like, if I don't feel good, y'all gonna know. Everybody gonna know that Jonathan is not having a good day. And a lot of, growing up, it was always, Jonathan, you wear your heart on your sleeve. And I was always like, well, why is that a bad thing? And it's this idea that if we can harden you up and we can toughen you up, then we can basically get you ready for jail. Like, it really is it's a systematic thing, in my opinion. And so I'm watching this film and I'm thinking about, the school to prison pipeline, and I'm thinking about all these different schematical pieces that live around us, and I'm going, life is really trying to, and I think about my brother being a straight black man. Like, I think about the ways that the world treated him, and I think about the ways that the world treated me, and even though they were two different dichotomies, right, they were still doing the same exact thing to both me and my brother. They were literally doing the same thing. They were trying to make me harder because they wanted me to present as a certain way, and they were trying to make him harder so that way they would say, look what happened to you because you didn't fall in line as a black man, right? And so I think about that, how that ties into the idea of being trans and seeing the trans women deal with what they're dealing with, right? They're trying to navigate systems that have been built to do the same thing to them, right? Well, you were tricking and you were hoeing, so you brought that on yourself, right? When the reality is we're not giving Black trans women jobs or giving them an opportunity to live thorough and full lives. So
they're suffering from the same racism that
system.
is plaguing all of us.
System.
It's like a very gender expansive attack on Blackness.
Yeah.
And just to add on the final scene, as Ain't I a Woman is playing, also the reality is Sojourner Truth did not say that. This was a person who was formerly enslaved. There's no recording of it, and we all know, like progressive politics now, the abolition movement had its anti-Blackness in it. It had its racism.
Yep.
So they had this Black woman up there, and she said, "Ain't I a woman?" But as I just know that someone who was enslaved is not trying to argue about their gender. You know what I mean? They're trying to, bitch, I'm trying to be free. I want you to treat me like a human being. You think I got up there and tried to argue my equality to white women? You're ridiculous. And that's a lot of people, a thing a lot of people don't know. They wear that "Ain't I a Woman" on their chest. Ain't I a human being? Ain't I a person?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to get at, and that's the limitation, because we're sacrificing so much, like you said, to get into the illusion of femininity, the illusion of womanhood as presented by us from white folks. There is something better and broader and deeper and more rooted and richer in actually getting to the reality of Blackness and how Black women, Black trans folks, Black non-binary folks are expressing themselves and finding love and joy in themselves that I desire to see at a larger level. Because even talking to a friend about this, we don't see like the aspirational womanhood isn't studs. It isn't butches. Those are people who identify as women. Like, we are so locked in, and I get it because it's a survival mechanism. But again, we're not surviving it.
It's also sexism.
It's very much sexism. It's very much misogynoir. It's all these things, and I appreciate films like this opening it up. But I would hate for us to be limited on just being like, well, I can get your man, and you can get your man, and I can get this man.
It's so much more than that.
It's so much more. Who is it?
Like that last scene, that's what, what stuck out to me is like, so who is this for though? Because aren't we trying to get past always requiring trans people to disclose their transition to us?
That's what I felt too with the idea of the nude. The dick exposed to me felt very raw and unnecessary. I get the idea of expressing your body like expression, but I also felt like it was like this could have been made fully clothed. I don't feel like
an exposure.
Which is why I laughed at the idea of the tribal music coming in, because I was like,
that's the reality.
We're getting down to the basics.
Sorry to cut you off. It just feels like
no point,
that's what it just feels like. How, like, the way what I'm hearing from your statements is this, like, how long it just takes to evolve as like a cultural imagination. Like, I feel like we don't make up the majority of people who think like this.
Nope.
Like, and I feel like that's what we're like brushing up against, that like they are so far behind. And I don't say that like pejoratively, or maybe I do, because it's like, it feels like I'm with you. I want people to be getting there, to be able to have the space, to be able to tell these expansive stories, for us to be able to really deal with like dismantling all of these oppressive structures that force us to be able to try to go back into these boxes and do these things. But maybe it's the pessimism. I don't know.
No, I think what you're speaking to, and this is what I constantly think about, is how there's that sect, and I don't want to say that sect as if I'm not like, I feel like there is a certain people who are scared of the freedom of thinking bigger, is what that's the reason why for me as a non-binary person, some folks can't really understand me, or it's not that you can't understand me, it's just, and some of it is safety, some of it is for survival, who knows, right? But I think that there are some people who literally like living like this. They're like, I'm okay right here in this little box, and I'm okay.
Like literally.
Right. And so for them to be able to see an expansive world outside of that, and I'm gonna be real, Tre'vell has clocked me on that years ago. Tre'vell was like, nigga, you are making good money and you are doing okay. Why are you so, and it hit me. No, it really did. It really did hit me in a way where I was like, yo, how, like, why am I here? And then it hit me, oh, you're so used to being in this bad place that you can't see yourself outside of that box. So I think about that in terms of like transness, and you saying we need to have expansive and the imagination and stuff. The world has told us ever since, I always ask people, when was the first time you were told to be quiet, right? Like, when you were a kid, usually 3 or 4, someone has told you, girl, be quiet, you talk too much. Now I get paid to talk. It's like one of those things of, we're constantly put in this little thing of like, this is where you should be and this is where you should stay. And the moment you step out of that, it's hard to imagine what life could be beyond that.
Because I know people that this would be so beyond what they're...
Oh my God, I would hate to watch this with certain people.
Yes.
I would love it. I think it's fun.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I think that, sorry
No,
to
go ahead.
interrupt you. I think the nudity in the last scene was like really beautiful. I think there's a lot of power in showing marginalized people, especially like people who don't get treated with respect, with like beauty and respect in that way. And I thought it was very powerful. I thought that's what the whole movie did. And I think like what y'all are talking about really made me think of that one scene where I forget her name, but she was talking about how the black men are attracted to her, and when they come around and they show the guy dancing in a do-rag, and it's like a freedom washes over them, and they're able to like relax and let their guard down. And I think that's like the goal for everyone in all these films. It's not about like what's your sexuality or what is, like, I think we are like trapped in those boxes of like trying to be like passing or trying to be like what, you know, the heteronormative everything tells us we should be. But like the beauty of it is like the freedom and this like world where we can just like exist and not have to like, you or this, and you know, I don't know,
Just
it's
be naked.
Yes, exactly.
And it be cute.
Naked,
like it's just cute.
Yeah.
Like in one side it's like it can feel like an exposure of like it reminds me of that meme of Rihanna throwing the
money.
Not throwing the money, but throwing the card at the BET Awards, like, here, just take it. Like it can feel like an exposure of like, y'all want to see the dick so bad, here's the dick. But then it's like the other side of it is like, if anybody were, I think I would love to have a filmmaker get a good nude shot of me. You know, like, that's cute. Like, there's so much power in that when you actually are in conversation with your body. You are in a relationship with your body, and you do want it to be like, it feels powerful, especially because these movies are being shown in theaters. Like, to just see yourself in an authority in a body that is literally so deeply criminalized is also
beautiful
in black and white
respect.
on like there's
And to
with
also be
music
unashamed.
playing. It's very there's that's why we love movie. Like there's a glory in that that I think is powerful in how I want to be remembered, and I'm you know there's so much beauty in that.
That last scene, I mean, growing up as like a queer kid, but in the depths of religion in the South, my first like connection to black queerness was a black trans woman. And you know, I was like 16, but like I was hanging out with the dogs. They were like sneaking me in the clubs, and like I was learning about her lived experience, and like seeing that in shot. She was a pre-op black trans woman who taught me about accepting my own body, accepting my sexuality, no matter how repressed it was, because what I was being taught from a religious standpoint was happening to me simultaneously. And I think when I witness that moment, it just brings up this like, it brings up these memories of a time where I was like longing to be free. And seeing these women, no matter what, and seeing our stories, I think for me is such a necessary thing, because like we can find the flaws, we can be problematic, but I'm like, that's still our story. Like it felt so familiar. It felt so like, oh my God, like I'm actually in the room with Coco the doll while she's telling me this like kitchen table conversation that we have to remember is a privilege for us to even be able to witness and hear. And like there's reverence to that when I'm thinking about these women and like seeing the way that they're talking about their experiences, because like there's growth. There's always going to be growth. We're humans at the end of the day, bringing back to the humanity. But there's something so important about the moments where we are, so we can see where we can go. And I think that's what that film really, really like hits home for me with. Like, no matter if I like the sound design or if I care for the camp moments, because Black people should do camp.
We're good at it.
Yeah, and like we're good at it, right? But I think at the heart of this moment in that story is for us to be able to like not necessarily understand it, not necessarily like agree with it, but like sit in it and be like, this is our people. This is us. We're magical. We're free. Like there's aspects of who we are that is like beyond our imagination. And like some people are living in, and it's actually like breathtaking.
I love that. And I think that's a great place for us to end. Thank y'all so much for joining. Y'all have been fabulous.
Thank you for having us.
Period.